All right, we're back with our recruiter, talent specialist, Alisa Walters, to talk about managers advocating for their employees and the importance of having that support. Alisa, would love to hear your insights on this one.
Yeah, we've all had that one boss, I think that I think that it's important to recognize that so many people in these conversations that we're talking about why people leave a job, that leadership, their management is a big reason why they stay or they leave. And it's interesting that in some personal experience, in an older team that I was on, the leader of our team had left the company, and there has been this huge exodus of people who followed her to her new company, and it was because of this amazing leadership that she led with empathy, and she listened and she advocated for the team. And that's among many other things that are shifting and changing in the previous company. But I think it's important to recognize that people stay for the people that they work with and their boss, and they want to feel that they are respected, listened to, and that they have somebody advocating for them in that leadership position. So advocating for a team, as a manager, it can be a huge balancing act, right? But it's something that needs to be done. It's so important. If you want to increase turnover, then don't advocate for your team. But that employee relationship with their manager is going to be one of the top drivers for better employee engagement and retention overall.
So, Elisa, what does that look like? If a manager is listening to this show, what are some very tangible, pragmatic things that a manager can do to know that they are hearing from their employees and that they are listening and they do have a good read on the state of affairs with their team?
Yeah. And I think that goes back to a really great conversation we had on another episode about effective communication and being assertive. It goes back to effective listening. Listen to your direct reports, their concerns, come up with solutions. Having weekly check-ins is so important to foster that relationship between the manager and their employee, so that there's that constant open line of communication where if there are concerns can be addressed, and then they can work together to come up with a solution. And also, if it requires taking additional action, they can take action on their behalf. And it in the long run, from an employee standpoint, it's a confidence booster. They feel that their managers have their back, and they want to work better and are more motivated to do their job when they feel that they have that support.
Alisa, can you speak to the manager's point of view? I mean, I've worked in situations where I've had a great direct report, but their direct report has not been the best advocate for the manager. So a lot of times you have a manager that reports into someone else and that person reports into someone else. So can you speak to that regard, when you know that you have a great direct report, but you know the person that they have to report into, it's not really the best situation?
Yeah, that's a good one, because it again goes back to people follow good managers and stay for good managers. So that person's immediate manager that may not necessarily have the best manager in terms of that advocating for their team, um, they will have to also ultimately make the decision as to whether or not that's going to be a reason to stay or leave. And I think that you sometimes don't realize how much a manager shields you from until they're not in that position.
Mm.
And I think that from that manager's standpoint, when they're kind of trying to advocate for their team but getting pushback from, their supervisor, I think it's important to recognize in that situation, okay, is there a way to, always going back to that initial communication, to sit down with the manager and have that conversation of, how can we foster a stronger relationship and come from a place of understanding? Maybe they've got situations going on. Maybe that person's manager is not necessarily advocating for them. And come in with an idea of, okay, let's get a clear picture of understanding where that person's coming from, and maybe even come up with solutions. Because if that's who you are as a manager, that's who you are in deep and bigger conversations, right? So always come from a place of effective listening, understanding, and coming up with that solution. So it might be that you, in that situation where you feel like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, you want to advocate for your team, but you're getting pushback, you may want to find yourself having those conversations of, those assertive conversations around why that person might be the way that they are, or why that person maybe doesn't recognize that these are things that are needed to be done to retain the team. It might be an education for that person. They may just not know what's going on because they're so far removed.
I think, we've spoken before about the importance of documenting things and being specific. And maybe that's another tool that could be useful in this type of situation, is to be really concrete and specific, and then record the conversations that were had in some form or fashion, just so that there's great clarity for all parties concerned about what's being discussed and what's being done or not done about it. Is that true?
Yes, document everything. And I love that you brought up clarity. It's getting clear as to why things are happening the way that they are, and have a better understanding and get clear of what's happening so that you can come with that solution. But yes, absolutely document everything and be specific. And if you feel that things are still continuing the way that they are and resolution isn't happening, then you have to figure out who you have to escalate it to, who you're copying on that email. I hate to say it, but sometimes that has to be done when you're documenting things.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, anyone that's in the capacity of, whether that's business ownership or, um, few places within that leadership, executive leadership team, checking in is so important, and really knowing what's going on in those departments, because your people are a make your company. And all of the things that we've touched on, morale and effective communication, all those things, the one at the very, very top might think that everything's running smoothly. And it's not until later that they're like, wait, what's going on? Something takes them by surprise. So it's really, no matter what happens in your business, being in touch, like really staying in touch with those different departments, and asking questions, and listening, not just having those check-ins, because you can have a meeting scheduled on your calendar recurring, but if people are just talking and no action is taking place, you might as well just not even have the meeting. So it's
Mhm.
really listening, understanding what's happening, asking those questions, and taking time to really get to know people apart from the people that are reporting into you, just to make sure that everything is running as smoothly as you think they are.
And
Yeah,
don't save it for the review, right? I mean, have those ongoing conversations. I think that's really important, so people feel safe and like they can always come to you.
Mm-hmm.
it is an ongoing conversation for sure. And I love that, Vanessa, the way that you said about having that sync on the calendar and no action being done. I once had a manager who, we had an agenda every week that we would have things that we were going over. So every week it was, hey, I don't see anything on the agenda. Is there anything that you want to add ahead of our meeting? And it was almost as if it was homework for each meeting that we were having, and we were discussing things and being coached through difficult conversations and difficult situations that were coming up. And for any managers out there, and for me personally, this was something that I learned. This was really a valuable tool. And we could always look back and see, okay, let's look back to see if there was something that we had discussed that might be outstanding. Does further action need to be taken? So again, to Sue's point about documenting everything, that's a great way to hold accountability, both from the manager's perspective as well as the employee's perspective. And I love the idea of having conversations that are ongoing to to make sure that it's not something that it was mentioned once and then it's never to be talked about again. I think keeping that squeaky wheel, right? Be that squeaky wheel if it's going to advocate for change. And then I think from a manager's perspective, I have worked in organizations where you get to a certain level and the broader leadership is not available. They're too busy. If you have if you are you kind of need to work this out within your team. But I think as an effective leader, making yourself available for those conversations, I think is really important, because you may learn something that you may not be learning from one of your direct reports. So I think it's really important to be accessible as a leader.
It's relationship capital, right? Like if you are a higher up leader and you're interested and you want to know and you stay in touch with your subordinates, you're going to build that trust in advance of a potential problem coming up, and they're going to feel safe coming to you and either expressing something that they're dealing with, or even letting you know of some trouble that they might see brewing or some change that they might see needing to come around before it becomes an issue. And I think that's really important. It's all relationship capital.
Absolutely. And being prepared to find things that may not be to your liking, but see those as opportunities. See those as opportunities to grow and to make things better within your organization. And you want to advocate for the person that's reporting directly into you. But if it's an opportunity to teach, it's a moment. What is it? Opportunity, moment of opportunity. What was the phrasing, Sue? We learned this from one of our guests on our show.
I think it was like moment of opportunity. I know yeah, something. There was the word
opportunity area.
Yeah.
Opportunity area. It's an opportunity area for you to discuss like what the issue is, your perspective, and the feedback you're getting from people within that person's team, in a way that you're not throwing that person under the bus or making them feel inadequate, but saying, hey, something here needs to change because the whole team feels this way, and we need to make a change in order to grow as a company and for that department to thrive. So yeah, I think staying in touch as as high up as it goes within the chain of command, or senior level leadership, is really important. It's important for morale. It trickles all the way down to the employee. It starts at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And
Anything else?
I think to add to, when we are speaking to leaders who manage people who are further at the top, I think it's also important to recognize that no matter how much you grow within an organization and within your profession, that you are still always a student, and there is always an opportunity to learn from the people around you who are doing the work that your vision, that they're seeing your vision come to light. And I think it's important to recognize that no matter how big you go, you can always learn something from somebody.
Absolutely. And as you say that, Alisa, I'm thinking about like people who get really high up in an organization. I think part of the reason that they can lose touch with their subordinates isn't necessarily because they want to or they don't care, but it's just that they, by that point, have so many other things on their plate. They may be traveling a lot. Do you have advice for systems or structures or people to put in place that will make it easier for somebody in that very, very busy role to kind of hear the feedback and to stay in touch? I mean, what are some things that somebody like that can do who wants to be involved, but they've got, realistically, they're managing a whole division or a whole geographic region?
Yeah, absolutely. And a great call out. I think that there's a couple of things. Companies having mentorship programs. I think it's important that if a leader can carve out maybe sometime once a month that they can be a mentor to somebody junior in the company, I think that is really instrumental, because having that ongoing conversation and that accountability to show up and mentor somebody more junior will lead to those conversations. I also think that having, I know a lot of companies may have it used to be a hotline or an email address where you can send, suggestions or feedback, making sure that there is somebody on that HR side of things that is taking that seriously. And then the HR manager who's working with those leaders can say, we're seeing a lot of this. We're seeing a lot of feedback around this. We're hearing this kind of stuff from employees, and I think we need to get ahead of it. We need to have conversations around it. And I know that companies put out surveys, but I think a lot of times employees, when they fill out a survey and having conversations with other colleagues of mine, it's like, you may be so overwhelmed with the work that you're doing, and this survey that you're mandated to complete may be a box that you're checking off, and you're not really giving it the time and the consideration that it deserves. So it's important that if a company does send out a survey, that you take the time to really fill it out and give your honest feedback. Um, in a diplomatic way, of course. But
with that being said, I was going to say with the diplomacy, because a lot of times, at least I've been in the position where maybe it's because it's been smaller organizations and it's like, they could probably weed out and say, oh, that came from Vanessa. um, is that, that autonomy, that trust that it's going to be received well and not used against you in the future, whether that be in a review or whether that be in another conversation. And I think that, again, that goes back to the morale and the spirit in which, managers lead. And it's, again, it starts at the top. So if you feel that I'm going to submit this, and if I'm too honest, it's going to come back to bite me, there's that nuance. So if you want your employees to feel that way and empowered to give honest feedback, you have to empower them to feel that way. And that's by leading by example and action, because if there's precedent out there that shows otherwise, you're not going to get that honest feedback.
yeah, absolutely. And I think with that retaliation, if an employee is afraid that there could potentially be retaliation against them in speaking up, then that's an issue with company culture. And I think that that's something that, as an individual, you have to look at and say, well, if this isn't going to change, then it might be time to potentially look for another opportunity, if that's something that you're able to do. The other thing is, and for other HR professionals or people out there who might be listening from, they're kind of on the outside looking at, maybe they're hearing from colleagues that this particular manager isn't necessarily advocating, or they're coming up with a solution. So maybe somebody like an HR manager, who's kind of that referee, might have to take a look at bringing in coaches. There is a whole exhibit A. There's a whole world of coaches out there, executive leadership coaches, bringing in somebody who's going to coach people at every single level on how to be that advocate, how to be that cheerleader and manage your team, with effective action and everything like that. So I would advocate for those kind of on the sidelines, seeing these things and trying to come up with resolution as a mediator, to really look at resources that are available that can come in and coach these individuals on how to better be a manager. And then if they are not coachable and they're not advocating for an employee, then the question comes to them, why are they managing at all?
Mm-hmm. And I think that having that external coach come in, which is an investment on the part of the company, but an important one, because your team, to Vanessa's point at the very beginning, your team is your strongest asset, right? But I think that can help with that anonymity piece as well. If you have that that third party in the middle who maybe people can share their honest opinions and input with, you have a kind of a filter there between you and the decision makers in your company. And I think that can also foster more authentic feedback.
Right. And it's an opportunity, again, for this third party, whomever it is, to tell you exactly what they're seeing. I want to also kind of recognize that it it might not be what you want to hear, but to listen. And you don't want to surround yourself with people that are just going to say how amazing you are. Um, that does nothing for you. I mean, if you're doing great things and they can say that very quickly and say, this is great, boom, boom, boom. These are your problem areas. Focus in on those problem areas, because if you just have yes men,
Mhm.
or women just saying, yep, yep, this is all good, this is all good. And why do you want to pay somebody to tell you that? If you're paying somebody, you want to find a problem and then fix it and have
Mhm.
tangible things that you say, yeah, we were here, but look at how far we've come. And it's hard. It's hard to hear when you feel you've been doing something correct and you feel like it's been going well and it hasn't been. But again, opportunity area.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Great conversation, Alisa, as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.